All right, and joining us now, he's been calling the men's soccer and of course UCF Men's Soccer for UCF on ESPN Plus, as well as on UCF Women's Soccer and ESPN Plus this season. Our good friend Austin David joining us here, and the regular season got done there. What was it like to kind of unique seasons for both? Unfortunately for the women's soccer season, their season kind of came to an end. It did not go as well, but the men's team started slow but picked up with a conference championship. What was your thoughts on both teams?
Yeah, I mean, for the men's side, it's really wild the turnaround that they had, going from 1-3 in their first 4 games to then winning 5 straight and winning the conference championship for the 3rd straight year. I gotta tell you, the first game that I saw them play against Tulsa, I didn't see any inkling of that in their most recent game against Memphis. Like, it was a completely different team. And the job that Coach Calabrese has done, the job that the players have done over the course of the season, it's got to be commended because it's like I said, it's an entirely different team, and it's incredible what they've done.
No doubt. And the women's had a lot of injuries, new faces. It just kind of just didn't pan out for them this year for Coach Sahadek. What
Mm.
kind of give me your thoughts on them, kind of seeing them in person and what they can build on for in the fall and moving forward.
It was kind of the opposite for the women's team for what it was for the men's team. The men's team, the first 4 games of the season, they had no offensive firepower. The defense was doing all right, and they were only conceding, 1 goal a game. But then on the women's side, they were scoring and they were defending. But then as the season went on, their offense kind of sputtered and they just couldn't get anything going. They were creating so many chances. Like the game I called against East Carolina, they were fairly dominant in the game. They just couldn't find the back of the net, and it ended in a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, so they kind of look forward to the fall, but the men have a lot to play for. They'll play for the conference championship. They're hosting the tournament this week, 14 field. UCF's the 1 seed. They're going to open with SMU, their rivals, of course. Longtime rivals. They played twice this season. UCF beat them
Of
twice.
course.
And Austin, you could make the argument that their season kind of turned around. Yes, they beat Memphis at home, the match you call where Matt Douglas got the start and got the win, but really the turning point I thought was when they went to Dallas and beat them 2-0, and that really got them going. They went on that win streak, they would win the league title, but here they are. They get SMU, Tulsa's the 2 seed. They get Temple, who played hot, finished hot down the stretch to make the field, including beating SMU in overtime in the last game of the season. You've seen all 4 of these teams. Give me your thoughts on the 4 teams in this field.
Uh, Starting with what you said about UCF, the turnaround, I think that game against Memphis helped, considering that Memphis got a red card and then it opened up things for UCF to kind of move forward and get some offense going. But then that confidence led into the SMU game. And once they beat SMU, it was skyrocketing from there. And then it just continued throughout the rest of the season. The fact that they beat them twice gotta give you confidence going into this game, considering it's at your house. You've already beaten them at your house, and it was a fairly convincing game. Towards the end, SMU was not the same team they were in the first half that they were in the second half, and you know this is a team in SMU that has always had UCF's number, and the seniors that are graduating this year, they've had to endure SMU knocking them out, ending their season for the last 3 years. And there's got to be some sort of thing in the back of their head saying, we want to win this. We want to prove in our last possible game that we can exercise the demon that is SMU. But when it comes to the other teams, Temple and Tulsa, Temple was kind of surprising because that was one of the big games for UCF. They really broke out offensively. They had 4 goals in the game. They really dominated the entirety of that game as well. And they also got their first win of the season at Temple. Gino Vivi scored the goal and they held on to a 1-0 victory. But I didn't see too much from Temple that I thought, wow, they're going to make the tournament. I honestly thought USF was going to be the team that was going to make it, considering the season that they had. And at one point, just a couple weeks ago, USF was first in the conference. That just goes to show you how crazy this season has been. You go from being first to completely out of the tournament. That's just wild to me. And then with Tulsa, I remember talking to their coach before the first game of the season, and he was telling me something along the lines of, we're not just here to have fun. We're not just here to play. We're here to win. And he thought that they had the personnel to be able to do it. And then they went out and did it. And I got to commend Tulsa for being able to do just exactly what they said they were going to do at the beginning of the season. Um, they've had some issues towards the end of their season. Their star striker has missed the last couple games. He's been their absolute difference maker throughout this season, and missing him is going to be big. I think it could allow for an upset for Temple to make it to the final, considering that Tulsa has been so reliant on him thus far. Um, so it definitely kind of leaves everything open to chance. Anyone can win this tournament out of the 4 teams that are in it.
Yeah, you're right. I did not realize. You're right about the injury there. They've kind of been banged up during the stretch. They did beat South Florida at home in their last game. Did Tulsa? South Florida kind of faded down the stretch
Mm-hmm.
and missed it. But I think you're mentioning. I mean, Alex Meinhardt, who's been a UCF
Yeah.
killer.
Mm-hmm.
He had the goal in the win against UCF to open the season. I called the match last year when I believe he brought them back. They were down 2-0. He came back and really was a big part of their comeback last year. If you will. But if he's a big wild card in this, you're right. If he's out, that could give Temple an opportunity. And Temple's played with a lot of confidence. In the back end here, they beat Tulsa recently at home, beat them pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a confidence there with Temple and maybe the most improved team in the last few weeks. Considering you're right, I remember seeing them. UCF had destroyed them. I don't think anybody when we saw them in Orlando thought, hey, they're going to be one of the top 4 teams, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise. Like I said, I thought USF had a definite chance to be able to make it. Outside of that, I mean, Memphis was the only other team, and Memphis was pretty bad this year. I think they only won 2 games total, and they certainly didn't do themselves any favors in the last game against UCF, where UCF dominated from start to finish. But with Temple, anything can happen with them. Like I said, at the beginning of the season, UCF was a different team than they are now. And Temple, kind of similar situation. They've started to find their rhythm a little bit. They've started to actually play together. And there's a potential for them to be the big upsets of this tournament.
So let's talk about UCF here. 1-3 start, lost to Tulsa 1-0. You mentioned the win at Temple 1-0. They lost to South Florida 2-1 at home, and then lost at Tulsa 3-1. They were without Yannick Ertl for that Tulsa match, and the Memphis match they would end up winning 2-1. What changed with this team? Because I know you've talked to Coach Calabrese prior to every match. What changed from this team from their slow start to the end? What clicked?
The offense. It's plain and simple is the offense. The defense was holding themselves perfectly fine. Giannis Lehrman, the fact that he was missing in some of those losses was also a huge factor, considering how immensely important he is to the way that UCF plays defense. He could basically play as a central midfielder the way he plays. He takes the ball from the back line into the midfield, and sometimes even gets forward onto the wings. He's kind of a wild card in that respect, but he's just so important on the ball. He's got a very sound mind defensively. Missing him throughout some of those early losses was very pivotal, but having him back has really shored up the defense. But the defense was never really the biggest problem. When you have guys that have the ability to score but aren't scoring, you can't win. As simple as it is, goals change games and goals win games. If you're not scoring goals, you're not winning games. It's as simple as that. And once you start having guys that actually start scoring goals, that's when you start winning games. So when you have guys like Atabuberry and Gino Vivi and Luca Dorado starting to actually find the back of the net, not only does the confidence go up, but you start winning games. And I think Ata's couple goals, against SMU and against Temple, those really gave him the confidence to start going forward. Early in the season, he was putting moves on defenders, but there was no finishing product. And then as the season has gone on, now that he started scoring, he's a lot more dangerous in front of goal. He has the moves that he can put on defenders, but now he's getting off the shots that actually test the goalkeepers. And that's big. But I think the biggest part of the UCF offense has been Gino Vivi this season. The stats may not show it, but he has been the catalyst offensively for this team. He's done everything that the coach has asked him to do. And I mean, you know, it's just been really fun to watch him play. Just the way that he plays, the way that he's on the ball, the movement that he has off the ball, the positioning that he has. He's really pivotal to this UCF offense.
I feel like he's been more aggressive in the second half of the year. Early in the year, he's passive, kind of look for the pass to set up his teamemates more than look
Mm.
for his own shot. Whereas the second half of the year, I feel like he's been more aggressive, looking for his shot, more confidence. Do you see the same thing?
Yeah, I think it just becomes more of what they've been working on in training. Early on in the season, it looked like they were trying to work Luca Dorado into the system. Luca was a player in high school at Montverde that was primarily a winger, not guy in front of goal, not a typical number nine. And throughout the early parts of the season, it looked like they were trying to kind of get him into the offense, get him involved, and try and get him just trained to be a number nine. And then once he started playing better as a number nine, they were able to kind of go back to what was working in 2019. You know, when Cal Jennings was there, they just had to pass the ball to Cal and he could do whatever. Um, but then again, Hatabu and Gino also had their abilities to be able to get in on goal. Now that they got Luca and even Jonas Schmalbach working and playing well, they can kind of focus on themselves now a little bit and be able to create themselves offensive chances, not just for their teammates.
And it's delivered, no, without question, to win the third straight American Conference regular season championship. And the reward will be SMU in the semis, who kind of dropped to the 4 seed. You called their last match when UCF came from behind, beat them 2-1. Describe that matchup. What are some of the keys to look for? UCF's gonna have to try to beat them a third time, whereas SMU, obviously, this is no stranger. They're no stranger to the postseason in the conference tournament. What are you looking forward to seeing in this match?
I mean, the first game that they played, well, sorry, the second game that they played that was at UCF, it was a tale of two halves. SMU came right out of the gate firing. They scored within the first 5 minutes of the game, and then they pressured the hell out of UCF to the point where they were having back passes that were almost intercepted. Yannick was having some problems in the back, just clearing his lines. They were really aggressive in that first half in terms of pressuring the back line for UCF. And the way that UCF likes to run things is they like to control the pace of the game. So what they'll do is they'll play out of the back, they'll have the center backs pass it around, and then they'll start moving the ball forward kind of progressively. But they'll be the ones that control the pace of the game. When SMU pressured the hell out of UCF's back line, it took away that control that UCF likes to have, and it made the first 45 minutes really, really difficult for UCF. When they got to the locker room, and I remember talking to Yannick after the game about it, uh, they were able to kind of sort things out, get used to the pressure. SMU didn't pressure as much because they expelled so much energy in the first half pressuring, and it allowed UCF to really take control of the game. And I think that SMU is going to learn from that mistake going into this game against UCF. They're going to want to try and force UCF out of their comfort zone, but at the same time, they're going to measure their pressure a little bit more so that they can do it over the course of 90 minutes and not just have a first half where they're controlling and a second half where they're on their back foot the entire game.
Kind of wide open too, though. When those two teams
Mm-hmm.
play, it gets wide open at times. Where both sides have a lot of open field there, really wide open offense, and some great opportunities to counter as well.
Yeah, I mean SMU is really known for their counterattack, and Coach Calabrese has made no bones about it. He's terrified of it. He's talked about it a couple times with me over the course of the season, and just how good they are at really, you know, punishing you once you make a mistake. And if SMU goes up in a game and you're forced to go forward and you're forced to try and press the issue a little bit offensively, you're going to leave yourself open defensively, and that's when SMU strikes. That's when SMU really kills you. So the biggest thing for UCF is the first 15 minutes of the game. And I'll tell you a fun little stat that I've said a couple times in the broadcast. Every time until that SMU game that UCF conceded within the first 15 minutes, they lost. Every time this season until the SMU game, if they conceded in the first 15 minutes, they lost the game no matter what happened. And if they scored within the first 15 minutes, they won. Then the SMU game happened. And they came back from a deficit to actually win, which is something that they hadn't done at all this season. So it shows the progression that UCF has been able to have throughout this 10-game season and now going into the conference tournament. But it speaks a lot to just the way Coach Calabrese has believed in his players and really changed the course of the season throughout the last couple games.
I want to ask you about Yannick Ertl. Could become a 3-time goalkeeper of the year in the league. Could be a top 3, top 4 all-time goalkeeper in UCF men's soccer history. What's it been like covering him and watching him in person?
I mean, I've seen him play over the last couple of years, and this year is pretty much no different. The one thing about him is just he's confident on the ball. A lot of goalkeepers throughout just soccer in general, they're not necessarily the most comfortable with the ball at their feet. Yannick he's just overly confident sometimes, where he'll help play out of the back, just as Giannis Learman likes to play forward. He'll take a couple steps forward, if defenders aren't pressuring him enough, and he'll boot the ball forward. He's fairly been early part of the season. He was a bit inconsistent in terms of his passing ability from the back, but as the season has gone on, he's been able to ping balls down forward and start actual counterattacks, which is what you like to see in a modern day goalkeeper. And considering that he has, a bit of a pedigree coming into the UCF, playing in Germany, playing at that level, he has that skill set that not many other American goalkeepers have. And that has made him unique since he has been here at UCF, is just the skill set that he developed at his time in Germany, bringing it over here. I mean, you look at Manuel Neuer, he's the sweeper keeper that everyone likes to refer to when it comes to German goalkeepers. But Yannick is a little bit like that in some respects. He'll play with the ball a little bit. He'll be able to ping balls forward. And he's always got his head up. And I think that's a big thing. Sometimes goalkeepers, they like to slow down the pace of the game. Yannick wants to speed it up. He wants to get the ball as far away from him as possible, but at the same time, he's smart about it. He likes to pick his head up, ping the ball forward, and try and start attacks as quickly as possible so that the defense isn't able to react as fast.
He's had a great career. He's hoping to push it more here to the conference tournament. I want to ask you about the MLS and the UCF and the pros, if you will, because well, that was one of the storylines this season. Luis Perez signed a pro contract during the season. It's part of this weird spring year. And for those folks that don't know here at Black and Gold Banneret, Austin David covers the pro game inside out as well as anybody. Explain how weird this season was from a soccer standpoint, because a lot of times, you have the super draft in January, usually some guys sign, but then you also have guys that could sign contracts usually right around this time. Usually soccer's college season's done. Here, it's just about to begin, and UCF was affected by it with Luis Perez signing a pro contract.
Yeah, and that was part of the early struggles for this UCF offense in the early part of the season, is because Luis Perez was such a catalyst offensively. Not having him was an adjustment period, and it took him a little bit of time to adjust. But he played the first game, kind of got injured a little bit, and then had to come out, didn't play the second game, and then by the third game, he was gone. He was already signing a contract. And it's been like that for almost every team in the conference. I know USF lost 2 players to the draft. I think SMU lost 2 players to the draft. One of them did get drafted, but opted to stay at SMU. I think it was Brandon Tervega, their center back. And he got drafted in the 3rd round, if I'm not mistaken. But you've had a lot of players that have just up and left, either first game of the season, before the season even started, or even for Orlando City's sake, they had a player from Georgetown just come to them a week ago. He played 8 games throughout their season at Georgetown and then left the day before their final game. It's just, that's the way the season has gone. But it's interesting that we talk about the spring season because I don't know how much Coach Calabrese has said that publicly, but every single coach that I have talked to throughout this season in conference has been begging for a spring season, a fall season and a spring season to be able to kind of mimic the pro game, to not have to play 2 to 3 games a week. Instead of playing that, they are able to play 1 game a week, stretch it out, not have the toll that it takes on some of the players' bodies throughout the course of a very shortened fall season. And I think this was the biggest test for that kind of concept because they've been trying to get the NCAA to do it. And now that they've actually been able to do it, albeit under different circumstances, they're going to want to try and push that even more throughout the rest of the future.
No one other than Scott Calabrese, who we've talked to many a times, has been a big proponent of that.
Mhm.
That's an interesting concept. That they and I'm curious what he thinks after the fact. If despite losing players and things like that, I think he is definitely a proponent of it. What's your thoughts on Coach Calabrese and his style of coaching? This might be his best job he's done at UCF since he's been here. But give me your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I mean, he's ever since he's come to UCF, he has really changed the game for this Knights soccer program. Um, Progressively over the course of the last couple of years, he has turned UCF into a powerhouse. The recruiting job he has done, not just from the international players that he's brought in, but some of the local players. He started to kind of mine some of the Montverde Academy players who are some of the best, soccer players in the country. And it's right in your backyard. Anderson Rosa and Luca Dorado, 2 starters. I mean, Anderson Rosa, I can't speak to how good of a job that he has done at the left back position throughout the season as a true freshman. Not even talking about the goal that he scored from that free kick that he had against Temple, but just the job he has done defensively and offensively. He's been able to push into the attack and he's been able to get back on defense. It's been incredible, and that's credit to Coach Calabrese for being able to recruit him to UCF. Luca Dorado has just scored his first goal against SMU. He's starting to kind of find his way a little bit. Um, you look at some of the other guys. I mean, they've recruited guys from Israel. They've got 3 players right now on the team from Israel. They've got Germany. They've got Costa Rica. They've got Brazil. It's a very worldwide game. And Coach Calabrese has been able to find these players across the country and across the world and bring them to UCF. And the better they play, the more players he'll be able to get for the future. And considering they've just won their 3rd straight conference title, you got to say a lot of freshmen or incoming freshmen are going to be looking at this program and saying, "That's where I want to go." And I think that's just part of what Scott Calabrese has been able to do since he's come to UCF. That's one part of the job is the recruiting aspect, the on-field product. He's very confident in his team's ability. Sometimes a bit overconfident, and in some of the losses, it's shown a little bit because they don't adapt as quickly. But I think over the course of the season, they've been able to adapt, and that's another credit to Scott Calabrese being able to adapt in a very awkward and weird season, to be able to adapt his players to a very weird season, and to be able to turn it around mid-season and win a conference title. It's been an incredible job for Scott Calabrese, and it really is only beginning.
Only beginning, and it's tremendous. And of course, having players like Cal Jennings, who's now at LAFC, um, which I want to ask you this because
Hmm.
people have asked me about this, and I don't have a clear answer. He got drafted in the first round last year in the draft, super
Hmm.
draft, Cal Jennings with FC Dallas, but
Hmm.
he never signed with them. He ended up playing in Memphis in the
Hmm.
USL, and now he's on LAFC.
Hmm.
Explain that for those that don't follow it closely, why that all occurred, because some people are like confused by that.
So the way the MLS Super Draft works is you get drafted, but there's no guarantee that you're going to sign a contract. And FC Dallas decided they didn't need him at the time. They didn't want to sign him to a contract. They retained his MLS rights, but he was free to go play with another team. And it may have been better for him, considering that he needed playing time to be able to prove himself in the pro game, or it may have been just FC Dallas saying, you know what, you're not going to play here. Go find somewhere else you can play. And he did in Memphis, and he crushed it, just like we all kind of expected him to. The guy scores goals, and it doesn't change from one level to another. If you have the ability to score goals, you're going to score goals. And LAFC saw that. They felt the need to go ahead and say, you know what, this is somebody that we need for our team. And he had actually signed a couple weeks prior to a contract with Indy 11 in the USL Championship. So he was planning on staying in the second division of US soccer. But then LAFC comes and calls and says, you know what? You're going to be our guy. He may not get the playing time that he's going to be getting in USL Championship, but he's going to get the pay of an MLS player. And he will probably get some games throughout this crazy MLS season, because the way that this season is going to be played is there's going to be so many games in such a short period of time. They're going to have to rotate some players out. So I could see Cal Jennings probably getting a handful of games throughout the rest of the season, which starts, by the way, this weekend. And so, yeah, it's been a kind of crazy wild ride for Cal Jennings, but as Scott Calabrese said, no player more deserving than him.
Yeah, no, we've been following him closely, and hopefully he'll do well in the LAFC there. I was kind of bummed out. Orlando City took Jonathan Dean in the second round, but didn't
Mm,
sign him. you know,
yeah, I think
so
I think with the UCF players,
yeah.
you've actually seen it more with the women's side than the men's side when it comes to the connection between the pros and the college game. And I've actually done an article over on my website, the Orlando Soccer Journal, in regards to this, because I talked to Tiff and I talked to Mark Skinner, the head coach of the Orlando Pride, the connection that they have. Mark Skinner wants the Orlando Pride to be Florida's team. He wants to be able to get Florida players either that have grown up here or that played college here, because he feels that not only does it represent the state, not only does it represent the city, but those players have an innate sense of what it's like to play in the summer in the state of Florida. And being able to play within the weather of a certain state and a certain climate gives you a bit of an advantage sometimes. And he was talking about how different it is playing in England, comparing it is to play here, and how some players just don't adapt as well. So being able to get players that have the experience of playing in Florida gives them a competitive advantage. So, will we see it with Orlando City and the men's team with UCF? We saw little bits and pieces of it with. Who did we see? We've seen Jonathan Dean, but he never signed. Haji Berry signed, but never really played for the MLS side. Outside of that, I don't think there's been any other UCF players that have really made it onto the men's side of things. But I
Well,
do.
well, yeah. Sean Johnson's the goalkeeper, New York City FC, played a while
Right.
back there. Warren Cravell is with the Philadelphia team.
I'm talking specifically about
But
Orlando
but
City,
as far
though.
as Orlando City, you're right. I can't trust me. And this has been, we've discussed this on the Black and Go Better podcast. Jeff Sharon in particular has been voicing his displeasure about it. You're right. Haji Berry, I think, is the closest
I
I can think of.
I can tell you though that Oscar Pareja and his entire coaching staff have been out to UCF games to scout players. So I feel that it's only a matter of time that any UCF player gets an opportunity. The biggest drawback for a lot of these UCF guys that are really talented and really good is that they're international players. And the way MLS works is you have to have an international roster spot in order to sign international players, even if they come from college, which is why you see a lot of international players from college not necessarily making it in MLS because they just don't get that opportunity. Those international roster spots are so coveted by MLS teams that it's really, really hard to be able to just waste one on a possible good player that comes from college. There needs to be a guarantee sometimes for some of these players. Jack Harrison was very much a kind of prime example of that. He was one of the top picks in the draft a couple of years ago. He's now playing in the Premier League for Leeds. There's only a handful of those guys that will ever come through that are international players. And with UCF, Atta is French, Gino's Costa Rican, Yannick's German. You know, uh,
Yeah.
even who am I thinking of? Who else is graduating this year?
Yoni Sorokin, I think, might be
Yeah,
graduate, right?
Sorokin. I mean, Sorokin is Israeli.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's very international. But it's an interesting story, and I'm glad you brought up your article there about the women in that connection. You see, I'm posting Kanya Plummer, who's
Hmm.
playing for the Pride. Of course, she was a American Conference Defensive Player there. Carrie Lawrence is on the Pride team as well, and then Sandy Zare just signed this year with the Houston Dash. Then your broadcast partner Bridget Callahan, a cup of coffee as well with the Pride as well. So you're right. There's that connection, that energy, synergy there on the women's side that not necessarily on the men's side. Doesn't mean you can't be successful on the men's side, but it's
Right.
right. There's just more options there.
Yeah, and Zandy, funny enough, she actually spent some time with the Pride as well as an international roster replacement player. And I think there's been, if I remember correctly, 6 or 7 UCF women's players that have actually either played or been in camp with the Orlando Pride.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember who was the forward a couple of years ago, the Brazilian forward for UCF.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Rodriguez, right?
Yes, yes, she actually spent some time with
Yeah.
the Pride, um, but ultimately she was just kind of too good for them almost at
Carol
the time.
Rodriguez, I think it was,
Yeah,
right?
Carol Rodriguez was almost too good for for the Orlando Pride at the time. And I remember talking to Tom Sermani about her, who was the coach of the Pride at the time, and he said, "Yeah, she's going to go play in Europe. We would obviously love her here, but she's better. So not going to get enough playing time here with us. So go to Europe. We're happy to help her and we're happy to work with her. And that relationship with the Pride has spanned 2 coaches now because Tom Sermani is good friends with Tiffany Roberts Zahedek from not only when Tiff was playing in the WSL, the Women's Soccer League back in the day, and Tom Sermani was coaching, but also when Tom Sermani was coaching the women's national team.
Yeah.
And obviously, Tiffany is an alumni of that. So she had a good relationship when the Pride started in 2016. But then when he left and Mark Skinner came in, it was a mutual friend of theirs that actually, I think Tiff said that it was somebody that worked for UCF that had joined the Pride that introduced the two. And they've started to get that relationship going once again. And now that you see, like with Konya, she started their most recent game in Louisville. I mean, Kanya is a international talent. She's played and captained her national team. You don't have many of those kind of players coming out of college, but it just so happens she was here at UCF. So it's growing, and I expect it to grow even more so for the Pride. But for Orlando City, we'll have to wait and see.
Wait and see. And then you mentioned Tiff. She was the one that recommended to then athletic director Danny White to hire Scott Calabrese. She played for. So that turned out
Mm-hmm.
to be pretty good. All right, last question. I know you're before we let you go.
Comes full circle.
Right, full circle. Conference tournament. Give me your keys. What's going to be the keys for you to be successful in the conference tournament for UCF and even for the other teams if you want to throw them in there as far as the keys to who's going to hoist that trophy and get that automatic bid to that 36-team field in Cary, North Carolina.
I'll start with UCF. I think the biggest thing is just keep doing what they're doing. Um, as long as they are consistent in how they have drilled themselves over the last couple of weeks, I think that they'll continue to be successful. I think that last game against Memphis helped offensively, just the confidence wise, to be able to see 3 goals go in the back of the net. Um, you were able to get a number of different players on the field, and I think it's going to be fun to see players that are brimming with confidence and brimming with goal confidence at that go against an SMU team that has struggled in the last couple of weeks. For SMU, I think that measuring their abilities is going to be a big thing. The first half, like I said before, that first half against UCF, they were dominant, um, but they couldn't hold it over a 90-minute period. If they can space it out over even 75 minutes, I think they can give UCF some really big problems and really make this game a lot closer for comfort than UCF would want. When it comes to Temple and Tulsa, uh, I mean, Temple just really needs to continue playing uh, with confidence. They've had a bit of struggles early on in the season. They've had some games where they just completely turn off and they can't defend, they can't attack, and um, I think against a team in Tulsa that if they're not 100% healthy, they can absolutely take advantage of. And I think for Tulsa, Alex Meinhardt, he needs to be on the field. If he's not, I think Tempo can take it.
Should be exciting. It'll get going on Thursday in Orlando at the UCF Soccer Complex there, and we'll see the automatic bid. Somebody's going to that 3016 field. UCF maybe gets in even if they don't win the tournament, but you never know. Better just be safe than sorry and win that trophy. Austin David joining us here. All right, Austin, tell the audience where they could find your work as you cover soccer, international, pro, college. You cover it all.
Yeah, it's been a fun couple of years. You know, I've been doing this since 2012, 2013 now. But yeah, it started with Orlando City. You can find my written work over at the Orlando Soccer Journal, which is osjsoccer.com. You can find all my Orlando Soccer Show, which is our podcast, at ORL Soccer Show on Twitter. You can find me personally at Austin David 22, and then you can also watch me this Friday on Spectrum Sports 360 as I preview the Orlando City season at 10:30.
There you go. He's busy. You're all over the place. But that's pretty fun. That's a good problem to have. That's a good problem to have. Hey, man, this was fun to do. This was fun to do. Great work this season, calling the matches, man, and great catching up. And we'll do this again down the road.